Welcome back into the channel. I am John Kurtz, joined right now by TJ Pittinger, great college football content creator, Florida State guy. He's got the Florida State channel, Double Fries, No Slaw, college football addiction as well. If you're into what's going on the national scene of college football, and we're laughing about this. I mean, it's just crazy. Like, we recorded an entire video reacting to the Jason Scheer report that the Big 12 feels confident, or at least some optimism, that they'll land Florida State within the next year or so. And then we get this before it even has the chance to see the light of day. We get Brett McMurphy reporting today that the SEC and the Big Ten are unlikely to take Florida State and Clemson if the ACC stays intact. So there is plenty of room for nuance and kind of parsing through the words of all of that. But I guess I'll start this in the same way I kind of did the other day, TJ, and I really appreciate the time. But in Florida State circles, like, how much of a reaction did this one from Brett McMurphy really elicit? Did this grab the attention of Florida State fans and send everybody into like panic mode?
I mean, a little bit, but at the same time, like, there's been, report after, like, there was I think they've been, I will say, I think they've been being prepped for it. Right. And so they're either digging, I mean, kind of like politics, you're either digging your heels in further or you're like freaking out. Right. And so, the Dellinger stuff happened last week, which you did a great job with. And then Scheer came out a couple of days ago and they got a little bit, again, either they're freaking out more or they're more emboldened. They're digging those heels in a little bit more. And then by the time Brett gets here, they're already freaking out from Scheer and Dellinger, or their heels are so far dug in that Greg Sankey could come out and literally say, Florida State's not wanted here. We will never take them. And Florida State fans would say, nah, he's lying. He's making it, so the ones that were already freaking out are just freaking out more. And the ones that were pretty, hey, we're good, are still good, even though it's McMurphy. I will say, obviously, the name of Brett McMurphy, being as big as it is and as good of a job as he does and as connected as he is, certainly carries more weight and certainly makes people pause more. But I think, again, like politics, you stay the way you were and you're probably not moving off of that too far.
So how do you personally view this situation and just where it's at and where it seemingly has evolved pretty quickly over the last couple of weeks, where, I mean, felt like a couple of weeks ago, everybody seemed pretty confident. Hey, I mean, they're going to get out of the ACC at some point. It's a matter of like how and when, but they're going to get out and it'll be the SEC or the Big Ten, to where now it just seems like the waters at least have been muddied more.
Yeah, I think it's not it wasn't like super publicized, but I mean there were rumors of like, could the Big 12 be a landing spot for Florida State? I mean, Dennis Dodd wrote an article not a couple months ago. I think it's been months by now, but maybe it was 6 weeks, 8 weeks ago, something like that. And so like those rumors have circulated. I mean, I still feel fairly confident that they land in the Big 2. Does that come at a later time? Is there a route for them to be independent for a time and then go on? And there's challenges with any possible scenario, but my confidence is still pretty high that they don't land in the Big 12. Not to go tinfoil hat, but I think there's probably like 8 different explanations for why these rumors are swirling. And the easiest and most obvious one is it could really happen. Like, they could land in the Big 12. Like, that is a possibility. But there's thoughts around, why would it be advantageous for this party to leak this? Why would it be advantageous for that party to leak this? Why, and we can certainly get into some of that tinfoil hat theory, but there's the idea that they could land there. And then there's the idea of like, well, who does it benefit for some of this stuff to start coming out now? And different aspects benefit different people and different parties and different groups. And so my gut feels like that's probably more the scenario, that this is pretty strategic and this is coming out intentionally. But there's also the chance that this is true and Florida State does land in the Big 12. But I still kind of lean toward they land in the Power 2. And this is probably being released pretty intentionally, pretty calculated by certain parties or individuals.
Well, I mean, one of the easiest conclusions I think to draw to this is like, all right, well, a little bit of a negotiating tactic, like trying to gain some leverage here. If you're the Big Ten or the SEC, like, hey, we don't really have to take you. We don't need you. Spark some panic over there and then take a reduced share on your way in, or a more reduced share if it was already going to be reduced. Is that kind of the prevailing logic from a lot of people here, that they would think that'd be one of the more likely scenarios?
Yeah, that and bidding against each other, Fox and ESPN bidding against each other, right? If you're trying to feign interest. If we don't really even want them here in the SEC, thinking that the Big Ten won't push as hard, maybe, and you can get them for more. Hey, we don't even want them here in the Big Ten, and thinking, maybe the SEC backs off a little bit too, and you can get them at a, not as much of a sweetheart deal, lower rate. Didn't the Big 12 gave Colorado a bonus for joining? Now, it was like peanuts. But if you're thinking that maybe you were going to have to pay a bonus to Florida State and Clemson, and Clemson wasn't really named in this, but if you're thinking that you may have to pay a bonus, could you pay less or not have to pay anything at all? Just get them in and you'd be good. So yeah, I think the idea of negotiating both with, the Big Ten and Florida State and the SEC and Florida State, and then also, fighting against each other. Another big one is legal reasons. We've talked about this. Like, I spoke with an attorney before we started chatting today, and, think it's pretty likely that the ACC, in an effort to recoup anything they can, will sue wherever Florida State lands, saying that they tampered, right? And so you've got to be able to go out and prove that you didn't tamper, you don't have to, right? You don't have to prove a negative, but like, you want to be able to show, my hands were clean from this. We were telling sources that we're on record saying that we didn't want them, and so I think that's a big part too. And obviously a commissioner is never going to say like, yeah, we want Florida State, or they're not going to mention things by name. Even Sankey said like, we're focused on our 16 teams. I'm aware of what's going on, but we're looking at what we're looking at. But I think the legal aspect of it is pretty big too, because I do expect when the dam breaks of the ACC, and certainly Yormark is going to go in and grab teams. If he doesn't get Florida State and Clemson, he's going to go grab some big teams too. The ACC is going to have to do anything they can to kind of recoup money. And so expect more lawsuits from them. And so I think that's a big part of it too.
Yeah. And I would even submit one more too, which is just like, it could be that like literally right now it's not like it's a huge need. So they'll just say like, why bother getting involved in this mess for right now? But when the rubber meets the road and Florida State and Clemson are actually out, well, then the scenario has changed a lot, right? It becomes totally different. It's kind of like last year with the Big Ten. There seemed to be a sentiment there for a minute that Oregon and Washington, like we're okay for right now. And then the Pac-12 clock struck midnight, and there they are sitting right there. And then we know what happened in literally like the final hours of the morning, right? I mean, It was like the wee hours of the morning where that deal actually got done. So I do think even if that is kind of their sentiment right now, it's easy to say that now as opposed to let's see what happens when Florida State and Clemson actually get out.
Yeah, if you're looking at the pretty girl that's like separated from her husband, there's no reason to go like get into a fight while they're fighting, right? Let them finish the paperwork, and then when she's back on the market, go get her, And so, yeah, I mean, exactly the same thing. Like, why would you entangle yourself in that right now if you're the SEC or the Big Ten, which obviously they wouldn't. Like, they're not dumb. They know how this stuff works. You mentioned what happened last year, and I got comments and tweets like, oh, well, that's different because, well, of course it's different. Like, no scenario is going to be exactly the same. But yeah, I mean, yeah, we got some of the same exact reporting last year. Like, they're just not interested. They're not looking to add. And then it was like, oh, they're available. We'll take them, and why wouldn't you?
Was the expectation before all this in the last like week or so from Florida State's side of things that it would probably be at a reduced share wherever they're going?
I don't think that's ever been my expectation. No, I've never thought that. I've seen some people kind of comment that and think that here recently. And that's never been my thought. I think, if they could get scared into doing it, they might take it. But I don't think that's ever been my thought. I mean, you can't have the ACC going on record and saying like we could lose $200 million if Florida State and Clemson leave. And then the next day, McMurphy puts out a story with Big Ten sources saying what value do they bring? Well, $200 million worth of value. Like that's what kind of value they bring. So yeah, I don't know. Like to me, if Rutgers is still on a full share, if Vandy's still on a full share, if Illinois is still on a full share, like, yeah, I don't really see Florida State coming in at too much of a reduced rate. I mean, I certainly wouldn't take anything less than 75 over 2 years. If you want to take 75% over 2 years and then you're in, like, that's fine. But my expectation was never that Florida State would go anywhere at a reduced share. Other people have some different thoughts on that. But that's never been my thought. And when I've talked with people who, again, I'm not sitting here telling you that I'm talking with Graham Neff and Michael Alford and others, but like when I'm chatting with people and I've talked with folks on the TV side, on the Florida State side, on the Clemson side, I don't think their thought ever was that it was a reduced share either.
Well, this is a question that, is one that I fear maybe I'm just living too much on on Twitter and reading into this, but it seems
Story
like
of my life.
I know. Right? I mean, it seems like Clemson fans had like a totally different reaction, at least a lot of them, to the Big 12 stuff, or they seem to be more open to it. Like, do you have any, I guess, one, did you notice the same thing? And two, is there any theory as to why Clemson fans would seemingly be, I mean, I got to be honest, I was shocked. Like, why Clemson fans would be a little bit more open to it.
Yeah, let me try and not get myself in trouble, because what I was going to say was, yeah, maybe I mean, honestly, like the only thing I can think is they just don't understand. Like they don't understand the dire situation that it is, right? Like we talked about this. I don't really see why, if you're Florida State or Clemson, you would spend all this money to go to the Big 12 and make a slight, larger paycheck. I just don't understand why you would do that. It's been, I think conservatively, Florida State and Clemson probably settle at like around $200 million with the ACC. That's my guess, right? So let's call it that. I mean, you can even go more conservative. Say 150. Say it's like a real sweetheart. They get out for 150. Why would you spend $150 million to make like $5 million more a year, right? Like, why would you ever do that? Piss off your fan bases. Break some of the ACC. I mean, some of the ACC rivalries and traditions are cool. Like we like going and playing at NC State. We like playing Miami. We like playing some of those teams, Virginia Tech. I don't understand why you would do that and so if you're a Clemson fan, like, are you happy no longer being able to drive to like every single game that you play every year and then going out and playing like in Lubbock and other play? Like, why would you be, I don't understand why you would be thrilled with that. So to me, it just, maybe it's just ignorance. Maybe it's the fact that they're not being called disruptors and Florida State is because, they've just been nicer about things. But yeah, that doesn't make as much sense to me. Why Clemson isn't just like, why they're not like very opposed to the Big 12. I've seen Clemson fans say like, well, we could just go in the Big 12 and win every year. And I'm like, well, you can do that in the ACC right now. I mean, you have one team that you're competing with, maybe Miami if they ever get their act together, but why would you change everything up for the same thing, So anyway, yeah, I don't really understand why they're not as like freaked out about it or okay with it at all.
The disruptors comment is a whole other thing. I mean, the SEC just added Texas. Like, what are we talking about? Like, I mean, they're the ultimate disruptors. So I would not think that would stop somebody if it's worth it financially. Yeah,
there's going to be some T-shirts printed on that one day with disruptor and an FSU and a Big Ten logo, or an FSU and SEC logo. Like, if nobody else does it, we'll get the licensing and do it. But
that's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Cut that out. I don't want somebody else to do it.
Okay, fair enough. Well, okay. So ACC Media Days is coming up next week, right? Like, how do you expect this is going to be addressed? Like, I've thought like 4 different times now, like, man, this is going to make for an interesting ACC Media Days. And now we've had this all added up here. Like, how do you anticipate that Jim Phillips reacts to it? Like, Michael Alford, I assume, is going to be there probably, right? Like, how do you feel like all these parties involved here are going to react to this?
Yeah, so the last couple of years, Alfred hasn't been there. Like, he goes to like the spring meetings, but he, like the ADs haven't. From what I've seen, now I don't know the rest of the ACC ADs as well, like Radakovich and Neff, I do, but and Cunningham, I guess. But now I'm listening to them all. I know Bucor. I guess I do know a lot of them. So anyway, but I've not seen them there. And so if they are, they're not as much in the limelight. Like, they don't get any press time, so they'd be just kind of doing one-off stuff. So if he was there, it would surprise me a little bit. But yeah, like I think. Norvell, as far as on a coach level, like Dabo, Norvell, like they'll get a very like, hey, we're focused on the team. That's all over our head. Like, I've asked Norvell personally, and he's just been like, yeah, it's over, in a media setting, but that's over my head. I can't answer. And then like players, like they don't care. Like, most of the guys going there aren't going to play in another conference anyway, because they're all like too old and won't be around. And then, and then as far as Phillips goes, like, he'll just give a very PR answer. Like, hey, it's been a challenge, but like, hey, we're, same thing he's always said, like, we're treating those students well. We still have, good relationships with some of our colleagues there. We have a disagreement and we're trying to figure that out, blah, blah, blah. He'll answer it very, very PC. And, I've got a couple of, I'm going, but I've got a couple of, and his segment and Florida State segment are both on Monday. And so I've got a couple of questions that I want to ask about it and try and get him to, I don't know, give us a juicy soundbite, but I think he'll answer it pretty PC. I don't think he'll get into it too much. I would love to know his thought, and if somebody going to ACC Media Days steals this from me because they listen to your show, then whatever. But I'd love to know his thought on that disruptors comment, because I do think it makes it somewhat challenging. But But I mean, outside of the lawsuits, like he's not handling a lot of the things with lawsuits. Like you give the. I mean, you've had Rohan on. Like we've talked with Doug about this. A lot of times you give the attorneys like power to do what they need to do in a case. Like
Sure.
You're not in there every single point. Like, oh, you do this, say that. Like it's the attorney's job. Now, like major course decisions, like hey, to withdraw the case or rebut this or rebut that, maybe, but like he's not very involved in lawsuit anyway, right? It's more like a PR thing. He's just got to like maintain civility and stuff. And so I'd love to know his thought on like disruptors. Do you feel like they're truly like, if they think this is what's truly best for them and their student athletes and their donor base and their university, are they really being disruptors? Like, what have they done? I mean, are they disruptors by suing the ACC? Is that the thought? Like, what is the thought behind that? And how does, and everybody listening to this, me and you, we all may have different definitions, but what does Jim Phillips think of that? Does he feel like Florida State is disrupting right now, or are they doing what they think is in their best interest? And the ACC is also doing what's in their best interest. If you'll remember back, the ACC did sue Florida State before Florida State sued the ACC. And so they obviously knew what was coming, and that's why they did that. But wouldn't that then make the ACC disruptors? Like, you sued an active member who you're supposed to be working in their best interest for. Are both sides disruptors? Maybe, obviously I'm wearing very garnet and gold colored glasses when I ask that, somewhat in tongue in cheek, but I mean, maybe it holds up a little bit.
Well, man, I hope you get those questions off, man.
We'll see.
I'm fascinated to hear the responses to these. I love it. I'm glad to know that you're going, man, because I would think like probably a lot of the Florida State and Clemson media is going to be wanting to ask some questions about this. So I don't know. Look, I know people will kind of like scoff at, some people will scoff a little bit at media days. Like, I'm a media guy. Like, I came up in the media game, been doing it for a decade and been to a lot of those. I actually love them because it just gives you so much access to ask so many different things. And there's a lot of coach speak and a lot of brushing it off, but sometimes there's not, and it can create some really interesting stuff that comes out of these. So Godspeed, my friend. I hope it goes well.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. Most of them aren't that exciting, right? Like most medias I've been to in the past, like so much coach speak, so much like, man, we're going to give it our all. We're going to get, so much effort, you try and get like a quick joke in here or there, like with a player and sometimes the players will like loosen up with you, but they've been interviewed all day. And so, but yeah, this last year or two of media days has obviously just been the best ever, because of everything big picture that's going on.
That's really it. It's like we're in a new era kind of media days now where it is changed a bit. All right. Well, TJ, really appreciate it. Again, check his stuff out. College Football Addiction, Double Fries, No Slaw, if you want the FSU content. Appreciate it, man. I'm sure we'll, as you know, I said this to you literally yesterday, so I'm sure we'll be doing it again soon at some point, man.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. You do a great job, and I appreciate you having me on.